Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation on how to become a CPRP, the eligibility criteria and the application process. We are joined today by Casey Ward Goldberg. Casey has worked with various nonprofit organizations, primarily focused on education and certification, which led her to her current position as Chief Staff Officer for the Psychiatric Rehabilitation Association Certification Commission. Casey has been responsible for directing and implementing PRA credentialing activities and programs since 2008. She utilizes her process-oriented skills to continuously work to identify areas for enhancement within the organization to include streamlining the CPRP application process. So today, Casey will discuss the pathways to becoming a CPRP. After she shows her PowerPoint, we will have a short Q&A session afterwards. Okay, Casey.
Okay, hi. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for hosting this item.
Thank you.
As we said, we're going to talk about the eligibility criteria for becoming a CPRP and the process that an applicant would go through in order to actually qualify to sit for the exam. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the CPR is and how it works, why you might want to get it, what the eligibility requirements are, how you apply, and then how you prepare. One of the first things that we talk about when we're learning about certification and licensure is what's the difference. And the primary difference is that certification is voluntary. It's done by private organizations, in this case the Psychiatric Rehabilitation Association, and its governing body, which is the Certification Commission for Psychiatric Rehabilitation. And the purpose of a certification is to provide the public with information about practitioners, about people who have demonstrated their competence in a specific field. And in our case, we're talking about psychiatric rehabilitation. Licensure is typically offered at a state level. It's a legal authority to practice within any profession that you might work in. A lot of licenses you see in our field are social work licenses, nursing licenses, psychology licenses, and the like. And these are going to kind of define what the scope of practice is for a profession in that specific locale. And licensure prohibits anyone from practicing who is not licensed. So right now for us in mental health, at least in psychiatric rehabilitation, there is no license. So certification is kind of the level of credentialing that one can achieve to at least demonstrate their competence and meet different state legislation requirements in order to practice. Sorry, this one's a little crowded, but some of the benefits of certification include recognition by a third party. By holding a credential, it enhances your professional credibility. It may help to enhance your own feelings of personal accomplishment and satisfaction. Definitely is going to support continued professional development because as you're certified, you must continue your education in order to maintain that certification. It's going to demonstrate to your clients and to your colleagues a high level of commitment to your field of practice. It's going to demonstrate that you have achieved a specific level of knowledge and skill. It's going to provide you with increased opportunities for career advancement and possibly increased earnings. That, again, is going to vary by state simply because the state laws are different for requirements in the field of psych rehab, but it is definitely potential. By becoming certified, it validates your skills and knowledge because you've demonstrated your competence, and it may meet your employer or governmental requirements in your state. Excuse me. The CPRP came about in the late 1990s. It started as a registry, which was basically a very lengthy application process and interview process that individuals went through who self-identified as working in the field of psych rehab. Once that registry was at a number that was significant enough to really matter in the field of psych rehab, to really demonstrate that there is some standardization within the field, USPRA, which actually at the time IAPSPRIS, completed the first job task analysis study, and that was a full study of the core competencies of what made up a psych rehab practitioner. We repeat that study, we amend it and revise it about every 5 to 7 years, and we actually most recently completed one at the end of 2013. Our program fosters the growth and development of a qualified and ethically diverse workforce. We provide avenues for psych rehab practitioners from all different backgrounds to meet the certification requirements. And one of the, I think, really interesting things about our credentials is it's the only one available to practitioners who might not have a post-secondary degree. So practitioners who, or individuals who want to work in psych rehab but may only have completed high school or their GED, there is a pathway for them to achieve the CPRP credential. When we're talking about meeting the requirements, we look at 3 components. We look at your formal academic preparation. So as I said, that might just be high school, but it might be a PhD in psychology or a PhD in psychiatric rehabilitation. It might be a master's degree in business. It could be really anything. We're then going to look at, based on what your academic preparation is, we're going to look at your hands-on work experience. So how much time have you actually spent providing psychiatric rehabilitation or psychosocial rehabilitation services in a hands-on environment? And then lastly, we look at continuing education and training. Almost all candidates for the CPRP exam are required to do some level of continuing education and training in addition to their academic preparation. Once you hit all 3 of those marks, and along one of our pathways, which we'll discuss in a little bit, you then qualify to sit for the CPRP exam. And these are our current pathways. The probably primary pathway people follow is number 4, which is a 4-year degree. Number 4 or 6, I should say. A 4-year degree or higher in any field, really. Those individuals have to have 12 months of full-time work experience. And you'll note on here a footnote that says it defines what full-time is. And what we're talking about is the full-time equivalent. So in the case of the average candidate, they need to have 12 months full-time, which is equivalent to approximately 2,000 working hours. So if you worked part-time for 2 years, 20 hours a week, then 2 years of that would equate to 1 year full-time and meet the 12-month requirement. For individuals who maybe only have that high school diploma, they're going to need the additional work experience. We do find that hands-on work experience provides an exceptional amount of assistance to candidates who are taking the CPRP exam. Those candidates will need 2 years of full-time equivalent. I don't know what the word would be. The offshoot to that would be the certified peer specialist, which is a new pathway for us. It is number 2. These individuals may have a high school diploma, they may have a college degree, but when we look at the pathway, what we're looking at is that certified peer specialist credential. And currently, that pathway requires only 12 months of work experience. It does not require any additional work. However, that's probably going to be changing here in the next few weeks based on the performance of candidates on the exam following this pathway. What we're finding is that individuals who take the additional continuing education and training hours and really put their focus in their studies into topics that are specific to the domains of psychiatric rehabilitation perform better on the exam. So although the pathway is available right now, I would encourage individuals to actually take the next step and do those 45 hours, if not more, to help prepare for the exam. Before we move on to this, I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions about the specific pathways.
I guess not at this time, Casey.
Okay.
But we are trying to see if we can get the slides to move. Right now, they're not moving.
Oh, they're not moving, so you're not seeing these.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'll point out a couple other things that are of interest in the pathways. If an individual has a graduate certificate or a degree in psychiatric rehabilitation, there are not very many of them available. There are several schools that offer graduate certificates. But there are probably only 1 or 2 schools that actually offer degree-level programs, either associate-level, bachelor's, master's, or even PhD. But those individuals have a major advantage when it comes to our exam because their academic preparation has been very specific to the content of the exam and the content of the domains that are covered in psych rehab. Those individuals will only need 6 months of full-time work experience, and they will not have to do any additional continuing education or training to help prepare. And you'll notice if you get an opportunity to visit our website, which is www.psychrehabassociation.org, you can actually view all of these pathways and the different steps. So again, it'll tell you if you've done a certain amount of academic preparation, then how much practical or hands-on work experience would you require, and then would you require the additional continuing education and training? Most candidates do, and they're required to do 45 hours of continuing education and training. And the training is pretty specific, so we will also discuss that.
Casey, I do have one question around the 45 hours.
Sure.
Do you have information on study groups that people might be able to join that could help them complete the 45 hours or, study for the test?
Well, the 45 hours can't be done through study groups. They have to be done through formal continuing education and training events. So we don't offer anything like that. We do encourage individuals to locate other practitioners in their area who might be considering taking the test, to form study groups, because that is a wonderful way to help prepare. You can really learn from one another as you're preparing to the exam. But PRA at this time doesn't facilitate those groups.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome. The next thing we're going to talk about is the actual process for applying. And it can be overwhelming, I find. It doesn't need to be. And I think that one of the reasons it's overwhelming is because you are, trying to show that you have this knowledge base, and most likely you're trying to either advance in your career or get a new job or any number of things that would put additional pressures on one who is getting ready to take a fairly intensive exam. So we've tried to streamline the process and make it as simple as possible for folks, but there are a lot of steps, and I'll be honest about that. One of the things we've done in the last year is actually moved our process online, and all of our exam applications are submitted online. We do not accept paper applications. And in order to do this, we've partnered with an amazing company out in Nashville, Tennessee. They're called Professional Credential Services. They actually process our certification exam applications as well as our recertification applications. And what they're doing when they're processing is they're gathering all the materials with the candidates and posting them to a site where they will be reviewed by PRA staff, and in that case, that's currently me. So I review every single application that comes through our doors or through our internet portal. And that process can take some time because, as I said, it is a lengthy process. And as we get through the different steps, you'll see the different parts that I'm having to review. And we do ask the candidates allow a good 2 to 4 weeks before they hear about the status of their application. That said, candidates can always log into their application at any time and check the status. And as it progresses through the process, they'll see different items checked off to see that they've been received or been approved along the way. The first step to applying is gathering the materials that you're going to need. There are a couple of materials that we require be in official form. That would be a copy of the college or university transcript or high school diploma. The other thing we accept is a letter from the State Board of Education or the high school itself on official letterhead stating that an individual has graduated and providing those details, or a GED transcript. And we require certificate of attendance from all of the events that you attend. Now, when we say that we require those, we require that you have them. We don't need the certificates. We only need the official copy of the transcript. However, you're going to need those certificates in order to complete the application process. The next things that you'll need to submit that are in paper are the PRA employment verification form, and this is a document that you fill out a portion of it yourself, indicating your contact information, when you started your position, how many hours a week you work there, what your title is, who your employer is, all of that kind of information. And then the bottom half of the form, your employer has to read and sign. And they have to acknowledge that the work that you're doing is indeed providing psych rehab services for adults and or transition-aged youth. And when we say transition age, we're talking ages 16 years and up. That the work you're doing is providing services for those individuals and that specific population. And the reason for that is because that's the population that we're going to test you on. So if you're working with a geriatric population or you're working with children, the work that you're doing, though wonderful and beneficial in the community, is not going to be reflected in the exam, and therefore your work will not help you to be successful on the exam. The last document that you'll fill out is called the PRA Continuing Education and Training Log, and this is where the complexity of the application comes in, I think. What we're asking you to do is look at all those certificates that you've gathered and write down every training that you've attended. You're going to write down the training topic, who the presenter was, who the sponsoring organization was, how many contact hours you earned. And we do count in contact hours, which are equivalent to 60 minutes. We do not use CEUs, and we do not accept training logs that are written in CEUs because we don't know what that calculation is. Every organization uses a different calculation. So we call it a contact hour. 60 minutes in the classroom or 60 minutes in an online presentation is equivalent to 1 contact hour. The more difficult task with the training log is identifying which of the 7 practice domains each of your trainings attributes to. And it may be more than one, and that's perfectly acceptable. But you'll see on that form when you download it from our website, little check boxes where you just mark off which domains you feel were represented in that training topic. There is no requirement that your trainings have to cross all 7 domains. There's no requirement that you couldn't do them all in say, professional role competencies. But I would not encourage that because it will not help you on the exam. You want to get a very good, well-rounded background in the continuing education and training that you're doing because the exam is going to be a very well-rounded exam covering all 7 practice domains of psych rehab. Does anyone have any questions about that? Have you seen the form? Am I going too fast?
No, you're going at a good pace.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
When you actually go to apply, you're going to be going to a website called, again, with our partner called Professional Credential Services. You can access this directly from our website. If you're on the PRA website, again, it's psychrehabassociation.org/certification, and that'll take you right to the CPRP section of the website. And as you're navigating through that site, you'll find an Apply Now button. It's a little blue button, and it'll take you directly to Professional Credential Services, where you're actually going to submit your online application, and you're going to submit your payment for the exam. And I don't know if you can see the screenshots now, but right now I've got a screenshot of the PCS website up.
No, we still cannot see the slides, but we're following you verbally.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you get to their website, you have to set up your own account. It's going to ask you for your email address, your first and last name, your date of birth. It'll also ask you for your social security number. That's not a required field. You can leave it blank. You can make it all zeros. We do not use the social security number, and I would suggest that you not put it just for your own security. But it is a field you'll see on the screen. It's there because other clients that use their services do require it, but we feel strongly that that's not a number that we need at this time. Once that account is set up, you're going to receive an email from Professional Credential Services. So you're going to want to make sure that you have in your Safe Centers list the email address at pcshq.com because any emails related to your exam are going to come directly from email addresses at pcshq.com. Once that is set up, you'll have they'll send you that registration complete email link. You'll be able to go right to their website, plug in your email address and the password that you've set up, and that'll take you to the PRA page at PCS. A lot of acronyms, I apologize. And on this page, you're going to see information for first-time candidates. So you're going to see a link to the PRA website if you need anything there. You're going to see a link to information about our exam. You'll see a link to the eligibility requirements, to exam resources and study materials, and to all of the upcoming dates and application deadlines for exams, over the next year or so. Below that, you're going to find the materials that you need to download in order to complete the application. The first one is the exam application checklist. That's not a required document, but it's a helpful tool. It'll walk you through the steps of applying, and it'll provide you with fax numbers, email addresses, mailing addresses for where documents may need to be sent. You can there also download the implement verification form as well as the continuing education and training log on this page before you even begin the process. So once you've got all those documents, you would click on the button at the bottom of their screen that says Begin Your CPRP Application. And that takes you directly into the application. And because we only have one test currently, it's going to ask you what you're applying for. The only one listed is CPRP, so that's what you would be clicking on. In the future, there will be other tests there as we will be developing additional credentials in the coming year. As you go through this process, it's going to ask you some general information about yourself, your contact information. We encourage applicants to use their home email addresses and home mailing addresses because those tend to change less frequently than those related to your employer. So we do encourage that, although we don't require it. It'll ask you here if you are a member of PRA. If you are a member, it's going to ask you to provide your PRA membership number. If you don't know that number, you can call our offices at any time, and we'll be glad to get that for you. You can also check with your employer to see if they're a member, and if they are a member, they can provide their number for you, and you'll receive the member benefits. One of the things you'll see is that if you are a member or a staff member of an organization that's a member of PRA, you receive a significant discount on your exam application fees. Right now, that's a $100 discount. So for members, you're paying $395 to sit for this exam. For non-members, it's $495. The next thing we're going to ask you about is your employment. We're going to ask you who your current employer is, what your position is, what your job role is. We want to know if this is a paid position or a volunteer position. We want to know if this is a full-time or is it part-time, how long you've worked with that particular employer, and we're going to ask you for your current supervisor's name and title. And that's so that we have the option of verifying information should we need to, should anything arise that we have questions about. And I would say that probably at least 1 out of every 10 applications, I do have to call the employer for verification purposes. The next thing that the application will ask you as you move on to the next page of it is what pathway you intend to follow. And it actually shows you the little pathways chart so that you can get a bit, make sure that you know which one it is that you're looking for. And the reason it asks for this is it helps us to identify where our candidates are coming from, and what level of education they've had, what level of work experience they've had, things like that. We're also going to ask you then, once you've identified your pathway, what your highest level of education is, and whether or not your degree was in psychiatric rehabilitation. And we're going to ask also what the primary field of study was. So if you say, no, it wasn't in psych rehab, we're going to ask you what your primary field of study is. You're going to put in there whatever it was that you got your degree in, or if it was high school, you can just put general education. The next question that we ask you, we put a reminder in there to send your transcripts, but we also ask, have you completed at least 45 hours or more of qualifying continuing education and training? That's a question that I believe only appears if the pathway requires it. If the pathway doesn't require it, I believe that question won't even show up on your application. We're going to ask you how long you've worked or volunteered in psych rehab, and we're going to ask you what age group you primarily serve. So is it adults, is it transition age youth, is it a combination of the two? And lastly, we're going to ask you about your special accommodations request. We do apply the Americans with Disabilities Act, obviously, for all of our candidates. So if an individual has a need for a special accommodation, there are forms that they can submit in order to make that request, and we will certainly honor every request that we possibly can within reason. I haven't had one yet that we haven't been able to do, so that's good news. The next set of questions in the next page of the application are about your other licenses or other credentials that you might hold. We want to know if you've ever been denied a professional license or certification, and if you have, we're going to ask you why, and we do need an explanation. We're going to ask if you've ever been subject to sanction or revocation of a license or certification by any other board. And again, we're going to ask, if the answer is yes, we're going to ask why. And lastly, we're going to ask if there are any pending complaints against you regarding your work specifically in mental health, which would be such that if you had a credential and maybe a consumer or even an employer might have filed a grievance against you that's ongoing, we would want to know about that. Answering yes to any one of those questions on its own will not definitively say that you would be denied for application, but it would give us the opportunity to better understand who the candidate is and allow our Ethics and Discipline Committee to make an informed decision about one's qualification to sit for the exam. The very last section of our application is your signature and verification of information. And this one's really important because you're going to be doing a couple things here, or agreeing to a couple things here, that are critical to your success as a practitioner. And if you do not agree to them, your application would not be accepted. The first one is that we ask that you read the Code of Ethics, and we do provide a link to it right there on the application where you can download it. It's a long document, but it tells you what you have to do as a practitioner and what you cannot do as a practitioner to ensure the safety of those you serve. And we're going to ask that you agree to that. We're going to ask that you've read it and that you agree to abide by that code. The code is the standard to which we hold our practitioners to. A violation of the code could lead to one's revocation of the credential. And we really don't want to see that happen. So we want to make sure that you have a good understanding, a very good understanding of what our expectations are of practitioners and individuals who are using that CPRP credential. We're also going to ask you to abide by the laws and statutes of the legal jurisdiction in which you work. And that's because, obviously, we want to make sure that people are practicing within the legal guise of their own community. And those rules may be different from state to state. They may be different from country to country. So we want to make sure that you understand that where you're working are the laws and rules that you need to follow. And we are going to ask you if you're involved in any activities that could be considered a felony under the law, or if you're under probation or parole for any activities that were considered a felony under the law. Again, these are not questions that, if you state yes, you are currently involved, or if you were to say that you were on probation or parole, an answer of yes is not an automatic denial of application. We're going to ask for more information. We're going to want to understand the circumstances of the offense. We're going to want to understand the timeline of the offense. If it's something that's 25 years ago, it's going to be looked at very differently than if you tell us it's something that happened 2 years ago. But we do look at that in great detail. We have a committee of the Certification Commission. It's our Ethics and Discipline Committee that would review the application at length and may even choose to interview the applicant personally to ensure their confidence in that person's ability and ensure that that person would be a qualified practitioner should they pass the exam. The other thing we're going to ask is that you attest to a few statements. And the first one is that the CPRP exam is a secure and confidential test instrument. What we're saying there is that exam information and information that's on it cannot be shared. You're not going to receive the answers to the questions on the test because then that exam is no longer secure. We're going to ask that you not discuss, not describe, and not otherwise reveal contents of the exam to other individuals who might potentially take the exam. And again, that's to keep the security of the exam and to keep it, to ensure that the passing score on that is a confident passing score. If individuals are sharing what's on the exam and sharing answers to items on the exam, then they're not actually demonstrating their own knowledge and competence. They're demonstrating someone else's knowledge and competence. And lastly, we ask that you state that you understand that sharing or discussing test items reduces the value of your own certification should you earn it and compromises the validity of the test. We then want to make sure that candidates understand that once they're certified, we do share your information. We share it with your state and local chapters. We share it with organizations that might be providing events that are going to be beneficial to your professional development. And we're going to share that unless you very specifically and in writing indicate that we cannot do that. We don't share it with we don't sell our mailing list or anything like that. So we only share it in the event that we really believe that the information that another organization may have is going to be useful to you. And we do maintain a directory of CPRPs, and we ask that you indicate that you understand that your name will be included on that. We include the practitioner's name, their city, state, or province, and a work phone number, and possibly email address, so that should we receive a call of someone looking for a practitioner, or should we receive a call asking to verify one's credential, that we're able to do that. And then lastly, you've signed this document electronically. So we're basically stating that your digital signature indicates that you're understanding that the information that you've provided is accurate and truthful, and that should we discover otherwise, we could deny the application. there are times that someone may complete an application for you, such as an employer or something like that. So we do ask that the applicant's full name be indicated, the name of the person completing the application be indicated, and their relationship to the applicant. So in most cases, it's going to say, if I'm completing the application for my applicant's name, I'm going to say Casey or Goldberg. If for the next item, which is who's completing it, it's going to be my name again, and relationship to applicant is going to be self. And that's probably most common. Once you've submitted that, you get an opportunity to review everything that you've stated in your application. So you kind of see it one more time, make sure you've got everything correct. If you feel like you want to make a change, you can go back. And if you feel like you're ready to move on, you can answer the question where it asks if you agree that everything you've submitted is true. Say yes, and that'll take you to the payment part of our application. And we have a couple options for payment. Online payment is secure. We encourage you to pay online. It's the most simple way to do it. Professional Credential Services accepts Visa, MasterCard, and Discover. They unfortunately don't accept American Express. But if you're, especially in a case where maybe an employer is paying for your application, they often like to write a check. If they want to do that, they're more than welcome to. Your application's already been submitted, and once PCS receives your payment, then it would be applied to your application, and your application would become live for me to review. Does anyone have any questions?
Not at this time, Casey. We do have 2 questions from chat, though. Would you do you want those questions now, or do you want to wait until you complete the PowerPoint?
If I've covered it already, I'd be happy to take them now.
Okay. The first question is from Alan, and it's a statement and a question as well.
Okay.
As a novice in the area of human service, integrated services with lived experience, how much face-to-face contact and training and education will make one competent to provide services?
Okay. That one is it really varies. And not one of those things will make someone competent to provide services. What makes someone competent, or at least be able to demonstrate their competence, is that they've successfully passed the exam. So an individual who's new to the field may not qualify to sit for our exams quite yet, depending on just how new. If that individual, and it would really depend on we go back to the eligibility criteria. It goes back to the academic preparation. So if that individual has a high school diploma, before they're going to qualify to sit for our exam, they're at least going to need 2 years of practical work experience. It's about 4,000 working hours providing services that have been supervised by another individual who is well versed and well prepared and understanding the field of psych rehab. If that person has a greater amount of education, maybe a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, they're only going to need 1 year of that work experience. And if they've gone so far as to actually do their studies, as we talked earlier, in psych rehab, then they're only going to need 6 months of that experience. The more important component of eligibility is the continuing education and training. And what we're looking for is for just about all candidates to complete a minimum of 45 hours of applicable continuing education and training classes. Those can be live classes, online classes, conferences and seminars, in-service trainings offered by employers, things like that that are true continuing education opportunities. So it's kind of a mishmash of an answer, I know, but
okay.
Again, the 3 steps to qualifying.
Okay. And his next question was the transition from certified peer recovery specialist to CPRP seems to be a bit of a leap. As a non-licensed peer engaging persons with mental illness, how can the psychiatric domain be satisfied?
Well, you're right. It is a big leap, but it's intended to be kind of the next step on the career ladder. And I really encourage applicants, and if you are a peer support specialist and you hold one of the many certified peer specialists or recovery specialist certifications that are out there, you're going to qualify with very little experience. And one of the reasons for that is that lived experience does play a role into one's ability to be successful on our exam, because you have a different perspective than the traditional practitioner, and that perspective will help you to be successful. That said, I strongly encourage even individuals who've gone through the more lengthy and detailed CPS programs to still do additional education and training in the 7 domains of psych rehab. Because you want to make sure that you have, again, a well-rounded background academically and as you're preparing for this test, because it's a difficult exam. So we would encourage you as an applicant to take advantage of opportunities where you can learn more about the 7 domains of psych rehab.
Mm-hmm.
And the PRA conference is a great way to do that. You can earn usually close to 20 hours at our conference towards the CPRP. And it gives you a really good opportunity to see the difference between the peer provider and the more traditional practitioner provider, or some people say professional provider. I think both are professionals. They're just different. It gives you an idea, and you get the feeling of what is it really like to be in this community. And I think what you find is that it's a very welcoming community, and that the CPRP was designed in such a way that individuals who kind of come through the system, through the medical system, and receive services, and quote unquote recover, can then move on to help others even more so. And you're helping yourself more by earning the CPRP above the CPS credential, because it opens those opportunities for career advancement, for financial advancement, and things of the like.
Yeah, yeah. Casey, when is the next PRA national conference?
Okay, we actually call it the PRA Workforce Recovery Workforce Summit, and the next one will be held the first week of June. I believe it's June 1st through the 4th. We'll be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's going to be an amazing conference. It's being actually done in collaboration with PAPSPRIS, which is the Pennsylvania chapter of PRA. They're a very large organization that does a large conference every year, and rather than doing their own, we're going to do a joint one, which is going to be, I think it's going to be a phenomenal event. It'll be held at the Philadelphia Convention Center in Pennsylvania. It's a great location, very central, easy to get to, especially from here in the DC metropolitan area. So we do encourage everyone to attend that. Information about it as it becomes available will be posted to our website, which again is psychrehabassociation.org.
Okay. And also at the Workforce Summit, you have, is it a pre-conference event where a person that is interested in actually taking some trainings to become a CPRP, they can go to that pre-event before the conference and do that?
Correct. We've done that for the last several years. It's a version of PRA's CPRP prep course. Rather than being our traditional 20-hour online course, it usually comes out to about between 10 and 12 hours. It's a wonderful course. Our primary instructor is Ann Sullivan-Stoyden out of Rutgers University and Boston University. She does a phenomenal job of really helping people to get a good understanding of that exam. And then, honestly, the very beginning of this conversation is something that we do at that event as well. We go through the application process, the eligibility criteria, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's a wonderful event, and actually it's typically begins the day before the conference and is included in the price of it. You get an extra day of training at no additional fee.
Okay, okay. I know a lot of peer specialists, the main question they want to know is how can this CPRP designation help them advance their careers? Do you know of any specific career paths that some of the CPRPs have taken, that were formerly, working in the field as a certified peer specialist?
It really varies again by state, and the reason I harp on them is because the state regulations are so different from state to state. But for example, in Virginia, a CPRP is a qualified mental health professional, a QMHP. A CPS is not. So if you have your CPS and you feel as though you kind of hit a glass ceiling and you can't go any further in the agency that you're working with, if you take the next step and become a CPRP, all of a sudden you can bill Medicaid for service. So that's definitely one avenue. Another in Pennsylvania, in order to be a case manager, you have to be a CPRP. So you could be working as a peer provider in Pennsylvania, and then get your CPRP and become, maybe get a little bit more advanced work, and then you could potentially be promoted to case manager or supervisor because you hold that credential.
Mm-hmm. And what about the state of Maryland?
Currently, Maryland is not one of the states that requires the CPRP for any specific job or anything like that. I believe it is, however, recognized in the state regulations. We're in 17 states, and unfortunately, I don't know them all offhand. They are available in summary and in full length on our website. So if you go to that certification section of the Psych Rehab website, you'll see a list of state regulations, and it'll provide you a very brief summary of each state, and then there's a link to a full document that actually has the full state regulations written into it.
Okay, so we know that Pennsylvania and Virginia recognize CPRP, and those are good states. Are there any other states that are good states for peer specialists to become CPRPs then, so that they can move forward in their careers?
Well, I think any of the 17 states that recognize it. If we're, on the East Coast, you've got New York. The CPRP is recognized in prose, recognized in the state of New Jersey. Pennsylvania, it's required for 25% of the workforce to hold the CPRP. In Maryland, it's recognized. I don't know the level of recognition. In Virginia, it's equivalent to a QMHP. In Georgia, it's equivalent to a QMHP. And Georgia has a very large CPS program. So I would imagine that it would be a great opportunity for advancement in Georgia. I can't say for 100% certainty, but that would be my gut feeling about it, if you will. And then there are some other states that require it for practice. So in a state like Oklahoma or Idaho, where they're not actually using a lot of peer providers at this time, they do require that practitioners have the CPRP. So if you are a peer provider and you wanted to work in those states, you would be required to get the CPRP.
Okay. And Alan wanted you to explain Pennsylvania just one more time for him. He missed that piece.
Okay, sure. Again, the full regulation is on our website, but my understanding of the interpretation of the Pennsylvania ruling is that 25% of the workforce in any one agency, so any agency providing psychosocial rehabilitation services, 25% of that workforce must hold the CPRP, and all supervisors or case managers must hold the CPRP.
Okay.
They're public, and Pennsylvania has the most CPRPs of any state in the country. They have over 650 in Pennsylvania alone.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of peers are able to take the certified peer specialist training for free or at a very low cost. What is the cost to become a CPRP? Just maybe an approximate.
Well, the exam itself is if you're a member, it's $95. If you're a non-member, it's $495. We keep the cost as low as we possibly can. PRA is a not-for-profit association. We don't get money. Testing companies are not-for-profit, so they don't really take into consideration the workforces that's achieving this certification. Because if they did, any certification in mental health would have a very low fee, because unfortunately it's not a very high-paid field. But we don't currently have any price breaks like that for different populations taking our exam. It's the same fee for everyone.
Okay. We don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll continue on here. So once you've submitted the application, you've made the payment, you've done all that, you still have to get us those official documents. So you have to mail that transcript of education. You have to mail your employment verification. And those things need to be official and original, which means that the transcript must be in its original seal to the university or emailed to me directly by the university. The employment verification form must be placed in the envelope and sealed and sent back by the employer and submitted to us in that format. And the last document that you're going to send to us is your training log, and that will take any which way you'll get it. You can log into your account at PCS and upload it directly if you have it electronically. You can fax it to us, or you can mail it to us. And if it's faxed or mailed, we actually upload it to the application as well. So once all that's done, you've completed your application, and it becomes a waiting game. which I know can be very stressful for applicants. But what will happen is as your application goes through the process and all the documents are received by PCS, once they're all received, I'm notified, and I actually will go in and review your application. If you meet all the criteria, you're going to get a notification telling you you've been approved. You're going to receive an email from PCS. Again, their emails are at pcshq.com. You're going to receive something called a notice to schedule. That's going to be a document that's attached to an email. It's going to provide you with your personal eligibility identification number and instructions on how to locate and schedule your test. We use Prometric Testing Services, which is the largest vendor of computer-based testing in the country, at least to my knowledge. And they probably have close to 1,000 sites all over the United States and many more internationally as well. So once you are approved to sit for the exam, you can actually pick the date, location, and time of your test that's convenient for you within the allowable testing window. If for some reason there's something in your application that doesn't fit or doesn't work, doesn't meet requirement, you're going to receive emails from us indicating that. So if you submit you apply under a pathway that requires continuing education, and maybe some of the application or some of the courses you've taken have been maybe CPR and first aid, well, that's not going to be accepted. It's actually on our list of courses that are excluded from continuing education preparation. You're going to get an email that tells you, you've been approved for so many hours, but you still need to do an additional number of hours because the following courses have not been accepted. And we will list which courses you wrote down that we don't accept. If it's not clear why, we may indicate why it wasn't accepted. If it's a course we're just not sure about, we may indicate that if you send us more information, maybe a course description or something like that, then maybe we would be able to approve it. But we're going by a fairly small amount of information to review those courses, so we are very strict about them. And you have time to complete the application if you're told that it hasn't been accepted. Very rarely have we denied an application. I actually think in the almost 7 years that I've been here, I think I've denied one application. There have been plenty others that haven't been approved, but simply because the applicant didn't follow through and send in the additional information that was required. The next thing that we're going to talk about, if we're all ready, is actually preparing for the test and the things that PRA provides to you to help you be successful on that exam. I'm not going to talk to you about the content of the exam so much because that's not my expertise. My expertise is in developing the exam, not the content of it. So what we encourage candidates to do in their first step is to thoroughly review the exam blueprint and the CPRP KSAs, or knowledge, skills, and ability statements. These are documents that are put together by the Certification Commission and its board of subject matter experts that really, the blueprint is exactly that. It's an outline of what's covered on the test. It tells you the 7 practice domains, the various tasks within those domains that you would be expected to be able to do as a qualified practitioner. And it's even going to tell you how many items on the 150-item test come from each of those domains. So you have a good idea to say, oh, well, maybe professional role may be larger than community integration, or supporting health and wellness may be larger than assessments, planning, and outcomes. Those are just random things, but there are 7 domains. Each one is weighted differently. Some have more importance, if you will, more criticality towards the success of a practitioner in the field. So we do provide you with that. The KSAs take a much deeper look at those tasks and really talk about what does someone need to know in order to perform that task? What skills does someone need to have in order to perform that task? So those really help you to not only have a better understanding of what we're going to test you on, but it actually can help direct you to looking for continuing education courses that are going to be most beneficial to you. So I really encourage you to use that. We also published an exam reference list, and what this is a listing of all of the materials that our Board of Subject Matter Experts and our Test Oversight Committee use to develop the items that appear on our exam. And every item on our exam, an item is a question, but every item on the exam is referenced to one or more of the items on that reference list. So we want to make sure that candidates have you know, a complete understanding of what we're using and have access to those same materials. Many of those materials are published by PRA. Many of them are not. Those that are published by us are available through the Association Bookstore or through the Journal for Psych Rehab. So those are actually available within the public domain where you could access those should you wish to. We also suggest that candidates complete what's an exam readiness assessment. So what that really is taking that blueprint and taking those KSAs and looking at each of those tasks and knowledge and skill statements and saying, do I know this? Am I ready to do this? Am I doing this in my current role? Am I not? What do I need to do in order to better myself in this particular area so that I'll be more successful on the exam? And that really helps you to then take the next step, which is to develop your personal study plan. And whether that be, and everybody's different. You may like to study on your own. You may like to work in groups. You may like to just take more and more courses or just read. Again, everybody's different. There's no perfect way to prepare for this exam. It's whatever is best for you. We do encourage, and we talked about this, I think, early on, we encourage you to find study groups if you can with other candidates, just to develop them, because you really do learn from one another. And that's why that component of work experience is so important, because there's so much on-the-job learning that we do and that you do as practitioners. So that will really help you as you prepare for the exam to be able to work with others who are in the same boat. Oh, now my show is locking. Let's see if I can get back to it.
Okay, and you're actually moving them now.
Oh, now it is?
Yeah, the slides are moving now.
Oh. That's funny, because then it stopped for me. I apologize.
Okay.
Maybe I'll leave it on this screen. Maybe it'll be better. We encourage you to visit the PRA bookstore. It's an online store where you can access all the books that we've recently put out. I think, and I say this with 100% confidence, the best book out right now to help candidates prepare for this exam, although it is not intended as a study guide, is the best psychiatric rehabilitation best practices. It's a brand new book. It came out at the very end of 2013, beginning of 2014. It covers the 7 practice domains in depth. It's written by some amazing people, names that you would all recognize, I'm sure. I'm not going to name drop, but they're excellent. And I would really encourage you to, either try to get your hands on a copy of that book, whether you're purchasing it through the bookstore or finding it at a library, or maybe your employer has a copy that you can borrow. Because it's a little pricey. It is a textbook, but I think it's probably the best tool out there right now for candidates. I also encourage you to check out the training opportunities through the Academy for Psych Rehab. That's our education and training division at PRA. They are putting on an immense course load of amazing topics, very specifically focused on the 7 practice domains. So really helping candidates to identify courses that will help them to better prepare for the exam. And then lastly, we make available to candidates a practice test. And actually this summer, we were able to reduce the cost of that by moving to a new platform. It's only $35. It gives you the opportunity to take a test. I believe it's 50 questions, which are broken out into the same percentages as they are on the real exam. And after that practice test, you actually will get a score report that tells you whether or not you passed that practice test and how you performed in each of the domains on the practice test. So it'll give you an idea of maybe you have more weaknesses in assessments, planning, and outcomes, or maybe you have more weaknesses in supporting health and wellness, while your professional role, maybe you scored 100%. But it really gives you an idea of where you want to focus your studies after you've already started to prepare. And oops, the next thing will be our traditional frequently asked questions. And they're balancing on these little men because they're very difficult to balance, because there are a lot of them. I think the question, and I don't know if it's come up on anybody's chat yet, because I can't see those just yet, but how do I earn training hours? So those continuing education hours or contact hours that we've been talking about. There are so many ways to earn them, and we leave a lot of room for flexibility, and sometimes I think that makes it more difficult because people want a more concise way of doing things, but we want to give you the opportunities to do what works best for you. So you can attend conferences and seminars like the PRA Workforce Recovery Summit. You can attend in-service trainings offered by your employer on topics that are related to psych rehab. You can complete online courses using organizations like Essential Learning or Relias Learning or CEU's Quick, CEU's for Less. There's tons of them out there. If you were to Google psych rehab continuing ed, you'll find all sorts of stuff. You can complete college-level undergraduate or graduate or even adult education courses in psych rehab. Lots of community colleges offer intro to psych rehab type courses, which are very helpful. And a course like that, actually, if it's a traditional 3-credit course at a college where it meets for 3 hours a week for 15 weeks, that's 45 hours. That meets your requirement for sitting for the exam. And if you can take a course like that, that literally is intro to psych rehab or orientation to psych rehab, that's going to be probably the most beneficial thing you could take. We have on here as how can I earn training as presenting at conferences and seminars. That applies more to individuals who are already certified. Once you're certified, you would actually earn continuing education hours, say if you presented at the PRA conference or at maybe a local chapter conference or something like that. You could also earn hours if you're already certified by publishing articles, sections of books, things like that. So we do leave a lot of flexibility for how you earn and document those training hours. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I don't see any questions in chat right now.
Okay, great. A little bit more on the trainings. We really emphasize that all trainings must be relevant to psych rehab and recovery, and that repeat trainings will not be accepted. We find that a lot of companies make their employees take the same training every year. Maybe you have to take an ethics course every year. And that's because they want to reinforce the regulations, rules, requirements of their agency. However, we're only going to accept that once. So you want to make sure that you're doing 45 unique hours for the purpose of applying for the exam. And that means that you can only use that training topic once in the 3-year period leading up to the exam, or again, once in the 3-year period of recertification. And for that recertification, again, only half of your training hours can come from things like presenting or publishing. Everything else has to come from more traditional means of continuing education. So where can you get your training hours? You can attend the PRA Workforce Recovery Summit. Again, that's going to be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, June 1st to the 4th. I believe the prep course that we talked about will probably start on May 31st. We usually begin that a day before the conference. You can also check with your chapter of PRA regarding local opportunities. If you're in Maryland, there is a chapter in Maryland. If you're in Virginia, there is a chapter in Virginia. There's not currently a chapter in DC, but maybe someday. That would be a beautiful thing. Pennsylvania has an enormous chapter. They do lots and lots of online trainings and live trainings. Mm-hmm. Again, colleges and universities, check those out. I'm sure that some of the local schools are offering courses that would be relevant and helpful for individuals who are preparing. And then lastly, those online teleconferences, offerings from PRA, and your employer's in-service training. And I know I've mentioned a number of times that the training has to fit into the exam covers these 7 domains, and you want your training to encompass those 7 domains. Well, these are your 7 domains. You have interpersonal competencies, so your skills interpersonally interacting with your clients and your colleagues. Your professional role competencies, understanding the professional role and scope of practice of a psych rehab practitioner. Community integration, understanding and representing the importance of community integration in psych rehab and recovery. Assessment, planning, and outcomes. Here's your more, that more traditional side of mental health, where we have to assess, we have to plan, and we have to have outcomes. You have to have an understanding of what tools and services and utilities that you're going to need as a practitioner in order to do those things. Interventions for goal achievement. We actually call that strategies for facilitating interventions. Or, I'm sorry, strategies for facilitating goal achievement. We changed the name of it because it's a much nicer way to say it. and what we're talking about there is how do you best help your clients achieve the goals that they set for themselves. number 6 is systems competencies. That's understanding and being able to work with all the systems that kind of integrate with psych rehab. And then supporting health and wellness. And this is our new domain. This was actually added and tested on for the first time in June of this year. It really talks a lot about the importance of physical health on mental health and mental health on physical health, healthcare integration, and general overall wellness. So your whole idea of taking care of one's whole health, that very holistic kind of perspective. And the details of those are broken out on that exam blueprint for you as well.
Okay.
When you're identifying your training, and this also is available on our website with a lot more detail, but we kind of give you some guidelines for what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. As we said earlier, training must address the treatment of and rehabilitation of adults and or transition age youth with serious and persistent mental illness. And again, when we say transition age, we're using our kind of own definition of that, which is ages 16 and up. Because those are the kids that are just getting out of high school and just beginning to enter the adult mental health system. But they're really transitioning from not only their childhood to their adulthood, but also understanding the differences in the two mental health systems of children's services and adult services. Trainings must be related. Trainings related to topics such as infection control, dealing with medication complications, will only be accepted if it's presented in the context of psych rehab practice. So if you just take a course on infection control, that's not going to be accepted. Other things that are not accepted are trainings addressing the treatment of children. And that's because we have done so much research over the last 6 years and made the determination that there is a significant difference between the treatment of children and the treatment of adults. And we will actually be coming out with a manual for children's services probably in the early part of 2016. So you'll see a whole lot on that particular situation. We also don't accept trainings on the use of treatment modalities that are in the opposition to recovery. So the use of restraint or involuntary commitment. Those courses, if they show up on your training log, I feel they should be automatic eject button. But I'm not allowed to do that. Instead, they're just denied, and you're asked to submit additional training. This is our list of what topics are not accepted, and some of them you'll say, well, of course they're not accepted, and others people question why. But there is a whole rationalization to each one of these items. But some of the basic ones that I see a lot on applications that are not accepted, and I encourage you to leave them off your application, are CPR and first aid, fire safety, disaster training, transportation, HIV and AIDS, domestic violence and abuse, death and dying. Although these topics training these topics might actually help you in your job and may even be required for your job, they're not going to help you perform well as a psych rehab practitioner. They're not going to help you perform well on the exam. So they are just not accepted. And there's a whole list of them on the website. This is a partial list that I have here on the slideshow. But again, if you visit our site, psychrehabassociation.org, you'll see a very lengthy list of what's not accepted. This is probably my favorite question. People want to know, what's the exam like? What does it look like when I sit down? Well, it's a computer-based test. You're going to go into a testing center with Prometric testing centers. They're going to ask you for your identification. They're going to verify that you are who you say you are. And then they're going to allow you to sit at one of the computers and take their test, or take our test, I should say. There are 150 items on the test. They're all multiple choice. There's no true false. There's no none where multiple answers could be correct. There is only one correct answer per item, and you are to select the single best answer for each item. You're going to be given 3 hours to complete that exam. So it's a lot of items in a 3-hour time frame, but that's a pretty standard testing window for a 150-item test. And all test items are scored as incorrect or correct. One item isn't going to be worth 2 points where another is worth 1 point. They're all equally scored. And then as you're going through that exam, you can, if you see an item and you just don't know the answer, you're really not sure, and you want to flag it, there's a little button you can click on the screen, and it'll allow you to mark it so that after you get to the end of the test, you can go back and review those items again. Or if it's one that maybe you aren't sure about. So you put an answer, but you mark it anyway, so you can go back and review it again later. I'll say the same thing that probably every teacher you've ever had has said, and that is go with your gut. If you think the answer is correct, go with it, because most likely if you change it, you're going to get it wrong. That's just a testing strategy. And an important thing to remember is that an omitted answer or an unanswered question is wrong. You don't get partial credit for not answering, and that question still gets counted. It just gets counted as a 0 as opposed to a 1. Oops, sorry. Another question that we get asked a lot is, how is the exam scored? And the first thing I'll tell you about is it's a fair and equitable process. We hire psychometric consultants. These are basically individuals who specialize in the analysis of statistics and numbers. They do all the review of our exam to make sure that the items are performing in ways that they should. They verify and identify the difficulty level of each item, and they use our board of subject matter experts to do that. They are not experts in psych rehab, so the board of subject matter experts are the ones who help them to understand what's a difficult item and what's an easy item, things like that. And they help us to develop the cut score for the exam, and that's actually an in-person process. We just had our cut score study in July following our June administration of the exam, where we brought together a group of subject matter experts who are not necessarily the same people who wrote the items, might be a different group of subject matter experts, and then they actually go through and evaluate the items without being given the answers to the items. So they're evaluating the difficulty level of the items, which the psychometricians will then use to analyze and determine the final cut score of the exam. One of the things you'll find in our exam is that the score is not the same every time, and that's because it's done using various statistical models in order to determine what that score should be. And it's kind of like a weighted exam, I guess, in a sense. If you take a test form and it's weighted by our subject matter experts as being a more difficult form, then the passing score on that is going to end up being lower to an exam that maybe has easier questions. So you have to get more questions right on the easier exam than you would on the more difficult exam in order to equate them and make them be equal. Hope that makes sense. There's a lot more detail that goes into that I am not the expert in. So I would hate to mislead you in that. I can certainly provide that, in writing. We have lots of documents that we can share if you really want to understand the statistical analysis of certification examinations.
Okay.
Once you take our test, you receive something called a score report. You receive this if you pass or if you fail. And what it tells you is, it tells you, obviously, your name, what date you took the test, and if you passed or if you failed. It then tells you, just like our practice test, how you performed in each domain. Even if you passed, you received this, because it's really important that even if you were very strong in some fields, you might not have been strong in others, and maybe when you're doing your continuing education for recertification, or maybe just because you want to be a better practitioner, you're going to go and take additional continuing education courses in those domain areas to kind of beef up your own skill set. And if you fail it, you're going to receive the same score notice, and it's again going to identify to you the areas where you really need to beef up your studies if you want to retake this exam. The next thing that happens, and this is a question I'm getting a lot this week, we recently had our exam scores went out, so I passed the test, now what? We're going to mail you a couple things. And it takes several weeks, but we will mail you a CPRP certificate, which is a wall certificate suitable for hanging. We encourage you to hang it. We're going to provide you with an ID card. That's basically a miniature certificate that you can keep in your wallet, so that should anyone want proof that you are a CPRP, you have that on hand. Your CPRP would be valid for a period of 3 years. And what that means is that at that 3-year mark, you have to recertify, and you have options for doing it. Most people do it the traditional way, which is they complete over that 3 years 45 hours of additional continuing education and training, and then they submit their application for recertification. Others, for whatever reason, decide that they want to retest, and we do allow that. It's a much riskier process, because if you don't pass that test, you lose your certification. So most people go the traditional route of continuing ed. You recertify every 3 years, and I apologize, there's some glitches on the screen. You do have to have 45 hours of continuing ed, and that's all you have to do. It's only 15 hours a year. It's really not a lot. It's pretty easy to achieve, especially if your employer is doing in-service trainings, or if you attend, like I said, if you're attending a PRA conference, it only is 45 hours in 2 years as opposed to 3. And then lastly, you apply for a year certification, and that's all done online as well. Oops. And if you don't pass the exam, and I'll be quite honest, a large percentage of people, probably a good 30 to 40% of participants on each exam do not pass. It's a very difficult exam. So if you do not pass, you do have the opportunity to retest. We have reduced the fee for the retest a little bit. It's $355. That's for everybody. There's not a member and a non-member rate for that, because those are basically the fees that the testing companies charge. And we feel that we want to make the retest as available as we possibly can from that financial feasibility side. There's a limitation to retesting in that you do have to retest within 1 year of initially applying. So if you apply for the exam, if you're applying for the exam this month, October 2015, so that you can take the exam in March. If you take the exam in March and are not successful, you would have the opportunity to retest in the summertime under the retest policy. And there are no limits to the number of times to take our test. The limit is that you can only retest on the retest policy one time per year. Does anyone have any questions about that? No, that's a common one.
No, not at this time.
Okay. And as this kind of slide talks about what I just said, is that an application is valid for 1 year. The retest must occur before the application expires. And to retest, you simply go online and pay the retest fee. There's not a full application or anything like that. We've talked a little bit about how much the application costs. There's going to be a little bit of a change in 2015 in that we will no longer have a late fee. We've restructured how applications are being submitted so that the fee should remain $395 for members and $495 for non-members. I could be wrong. That could change when we renegotiate our contracts with testing companies, but hopefully we'll be able to maintain the same pricing structure as we've had for the last 2 years. And then recertification. Once you're a CPRP, there are maintenance fees. You do have to keep it up in order to maintain your credential, and that is not as expensive as the exam, but it can be pretty expensive. It's $145 for a member, $245 for a non-member, but that's only paid every 3rd year. So on those other 2 years, there's no fee that you're paying to PRA unless you're a member. If you join the organization, they're paying membership dues. We just recently actually released our 2015 exam dates and application deadlines. So you'll see we have a test in April, April 11th to 25th, another test in July 11th to the 25th, and then in November from the 8th to the 22nd. Applications and online fees are due approximately 8 weeks prior to the exam, and you have another 4 weeks to submit the supplemental materials. So getting that transfer from the university, getting your employer to send a legal verification form, filling out that training log, and getting it uploaded. The sooner you apply and the sooner you submit your supplemental data, the sooner you get your approval, and the more likely it is that you'll get the testing date and location that you want, because those testing centers will fill up. So those dates are also available on the PRA website. We update them as we become available. But currently, we only do the exam 3 times a year. So it's typically spring, summer, and fall, and it kind of lines up nicely with kind of the school calendar and that sort of thing. Keep it all flowing through the year. And that's all I've got on the application. So then it's just a matter of answering any questions that you all may have. My information, if you can see the slide, is here. You've got my phone number and my email address. I will tell you that currently our phone system is down. We've just moved offices, but the phone should be back up and running perfectly tomorrow, I'm told. But my email is available, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have by email or any questions you may have here today.
Okay. Just one comment that this and this is from a person on chat, that the process seems to be very intense and serious. It seems very, very credible for reasons I am not quite sure for. Can you maybe expound on why the CPRP is credible across the country?
Absolutely. The exam is based in science. It's based on it's an evidence-based process. Um, we bring in some of the top practitioners in the world to work on our exam and help to develop it. And we take very seriously the application process. We want you to pass the exam. We want our applicants to be qualified. And that's why the application process is so stringent, because individuals who don't want to put forth the effort to go through the application process, in reality, don't want to put forth the effort to be a quality practitioner. So it's really important that we look at candidates in every possible angle, and we see the effort that they're putting forth in their professional development and their own desires to provide quality service. So the job task analysis surveys that we do kind of qualifies all of that. We do them every 5 to 7 years, where we take the domains of the exam, we put them into survey format, we ask about the importance level of each item, we ask about the frequency of which practitioners do each task, and each time that survey is done, new things are added because the field is ever changing. And that survey goes out to all practitioners who are currently certified. And it gives the feedback from individuals who are actually doing this job to tell us that our subject matter experts, who may not be direct service providers anymore, but are maybe more on an academic level, or maybe they're, supervisors or executives or things like that. But it gives them a better understanding and a basis in reality of what is truly happening in the field today. So those studies are critical to making sure that the exam does remain valid and that the content of the exam is true to what you as practitioners are actually expected to do in the field.
Yes, yes.
And that crosses, we didn't talk about this, but that crosses not only the state borders, but it crosses global borders. Our exam is an international exam. We don't test on U.S. law. We don't test on state law. The exam is on evidence-based practices in psychiatric rehabilitation, which are utilized around the globe.
Okay. So a certified peer specialist that also has a designation of the CPRP is a person that in the job market that makes them much more marketable.
I would think so, yes. I think that anytime you can add credentials to your background and demonstrate competence in a new area or an advanced area, that's going to make you more marketable in the community. It's also going to make you more sought after as a practitioner for individuals who are seeking services, because they want individuals who have shown that they are skilled and knowledgeable in their field of study or field of expertise.
Yes, yeah. Well, I can tell you that in my year and a half that I've had my certification, I've had lots more requests for presentations, and so I definitely do believe that it has enhanced my reputation in the community as a provider and as a peer person with lived experience. Yeah.
And that's fantastic. That's what we want to hear. That's the kind of feedback we want to hear.
Yeah, yeah. Misha and Alan said thank you for presenting today, Casey, and I definitely appreciate you presenting. Many people in the community have been interested in this designation, and so this information is much appreciated.
Oh, you're very welcome. I do hope to see applications coming through from the local community. Our next exam, as I said, is in April, so that application period is now open. So I do encourage people to apply.
Okay, we'll definitely work with people to get people to apply. I think the test is one of the things that holds people back. But if we can start some study groups, I see that as making people more willing to possibly apply and take the exam.
Absolutely, It's
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great resource, and it's a, those study groups can really help to build the confidence as well.
Hmm. And will we be able to have access to the PowerPoint? Can you email me that so that I can send that out to people?
Oh, certainly.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, that's it. We appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you next year at in
In Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Yeah.
Sounds great. You guys have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.